Stick my gum under my tongue. Good morning, everyone. We have a bit of a sparse crowd today. Is it because it's Super Bowl Sunday or what? As Grace said, you can't make your guacamole that early. I thought that was.
Kickoff isn't 5.5 hours.
I'm glad you all could make it anyway. We stand upon land that carries the footsteps of many generations of Kumeyaay people. This land is part of a relationship that has nourished, healed, protected, and embraced the Kumeyaay people to the present day. It is part of a worldview founded in the harmony of the cycles of the sky and balance in the forces of life. The balance of those forces provide for harmony within our bodies as well as harmony within the world around us. We acknowledge this legacy from the Kumeyaay. We find inspiration in the Kumeyaay spirit to open our minds and hearts. And I guess we have announcements today. One announcement anyway. Laurel's going to make an announcement.
Good morning. On behalf of the music committee, I am thrilled to be able to invite you to a concert here next Saturday in the evening. This is our first concert in 3 years. We are hosting Fred Benedetti, a classically trained guitarist many of you have already heard perform here. Plays a variety of styles. His inspirations are his father, Andre Segovia, who's classical, very famous classical guitarist, and the Beatles. So there's probably something for everyone. Concert is Saturday at 7, doors open at 6:30. Tickets are $15. You can buy them online using the same donate button that you use for your plate donation if you're donating from home. Just make sure to select the events under the drop down rather than plate. Or Pam will be selling tickets in the greeting room as you leave the service. Oh, right there where you cannot miss her. Don't go out that door, go out this door. And tickets are $15. I hope to see you there. Oh, sorry, one more thing. The choir is trying to reorganize. If any of you have not come forward and love to sing, or even would like to try singing, if you are an alto, we will hug you when we probably won't. We'll be very happy if you're an alto. Please consider joining the choir. Right now, Monday nights, we may change that.
Since I'm standing up, I can. You want to do it? I'll do it since I'm standing up. Nini? You? What? Prelude. I thought you played the prelude. No. Okay, no, sorry. Barbara's going to play the prelude.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay, this is a really wonderful prelude. This is one of my favorite African-American composers, Nathaniel Dett, from one of his late, probably his last set of music that he wrote for the piano, and which are 8 Bible vignettes. And this one it's an interesting, since we have the theme of love today, this one, biblical scholars debate over the nature of this love, but here, what it says in the book is legend. This is from the book of Samuel. And it came to pass that the soul of Jonathan was knit with the soul of David, and Jonathan loved him as his own soul.
Good morning. My name is Grace Lewis-McClaren, and in this community, I think I am better known as the mother of Mary Vale. I'm asking Mary to do the chalice lighting for me this morning. And these words are from a hymn writer whose name is Brian Wren. He writes, "Love makes a bridge from heart to heart, from hand to hand. Love finds a way when laws are blind and freedoms banned. Love makes a bridge when winds may share and, oh, I should have brought my glasses on. Anyhow. Love takes us through Love makes a bridge.
When winds may shake, yet not destroy.
That's it. Love carries faith through life and death, through
to
endless
endless
joy.
joy.
Thank you, Mary. Shall we do our church hymn? And we do it first in Spanish, is that correct?
De todos bajo el gran sol, será esperanza, fe, amor, verdad y belleza fernando, de cada tierra, cada voz. From who dwell below the skies, let faith and hope with love arise. Let beauty, truth, and good be sung through every land, by every tongue. May love be the spirit of this fellowship. May the quest for truth be its sacrament, and service be its prayer. To dwell together in peace, to seek knowledge and freedom, and to help one another in fellowship. This is our aspiration.
Our opening hymn is one that you probably haven't sung much before, but I thought, oh, this congregation's up for it. So I'm going to ask Barbara to play the thing all the way through, and then we will sing it.
Where's the? Love not waits for us to hear, to open and invite. Love runs to quiet every fear and seeks to set things right. Love offers life in spite of foes who threaten and complain. Amazing enemies, love goes the second mile with them. Love comes to heal the broken heart, to ease the rebel mind. Without a word, love bids us start to ask and seek and find. Love knocks and closes at the sound of welcome from within. Love sings and dances all around and feels new life begin.
Well, good morning. Is the mic working? Test, test, there we go. Good morning. I had mic troubles last week, but we got it working this week, so hopefully all will be well. So, last week I told you all that I'm going to be having surgery, and I got a surgery date. Huzzah! Huzzah! So, I'm going to be having right hip replacement surgery on April 3rd. So, yay! That means I'll have a new hip. So I'm very excited. So, hip, hip, hooray! So as long as all goes well. So, just wanted to let y'all know that update. So last week, if you were here, you saw we played with my ball of yarn. And I told you that I like to crochet, and I got a really big crochet hook. So, and I continued to play with my big ball of yarn, and I'm sure you can see that it's smaller now. And sometimes in my life, I get very frustrated and stressed. Does anybody else ever feel that way?
Anybody else ever, there's just so much to do. My hip hurts. I need surgery. Rah. Right? You ever felt that way? I'm not the only one? It's good to know. So for me, sometimes when I feel stressed, it helps me to make knots. So I tangle up my yarn when I feel stressed. And for some reason, for me, making knots in my yarn calms me down. Don't ask me why. So I took that big ball of yarn and I made some knots. And look what happened. I made a heart. That's a big heart. I made myself a love pillow. And I crocheted into my big ball of yarn into a big love pillow. We can play with this when I take it back to Ari. How's that sound? You can all give it a hug. So I wanted to talk about the most important love today. And sometimes this is love that we don't always talk about. We don't always talk about the most important love. We talk about loving each other. We talk about the community love. And we talk about, the most romantic love, like Valentine's Day is coming up this week. And it's like, oh, who's the person you've got a crush on, like, who's that romantic love? But really, what's the most important love? Does anybody have any idea? What's the most important love? We talked about this last week in RE. Does anybody remember what we talked about? Anybody? Self-love. Why is self-love the most important love? Does anybody have any ideas? I heard you back there. What'd you say, Riker? So self-love really is one of the most important love. And sometimes we're not taught that. When it's not something we're taught, we say, well, to say that, like, I really love myself, I think I'm really special and beautiful. Like when I was a kid, like, that's vain. That's not good. You're not supposed to think you're special. We're kind of taught that. That's not really a good message, though, because really, in the end, who do you have in the end at the end of the day, who's the only person you got? It's you, right? It's just you. Like, you might have a fight with a friend, or you might be frustrated with your sibling, or your parent, or your child. Really, all you got is you sometimes. We all learned that in the last couple of years, didn't we? Sometimes all you got is you. And so really, learning how to love yourself, that's the most important love. And sometimes it's the hardest. It can be the hardest. So how do we start this? We may not have been taught this. Sometimes this is hardest for grown-ups because we never really learned this when we were children, right? So sometimes one of the things I started doing is just saying to myself, I love you. Let's all try that. I love you. I love you. I love you. Yeah, I love you. Give yourself a hug. I love you. Just hug ourselves. Give yourself a little hug. If you have a heart pillow, you can hug a heart pillow. If you don't have one, you can just hug any pillow. So, just self-love, finding that time to self-love. One of the things I learned once was taking a picture of yourself when you were little and telling that little child, I love you. If you're 10, look at yourself when you were 2 and say, I love you. If you're 59 like me, look at a picture of yourself when you were 5 and say, I love you. That can be a really powerful thing. So the most important love is loving yourself. So this month when we're centering on love, send yourself a Valentine because you are the most important love. So that is my little story, my little share for you today. I hope you get the touch of the feels. It's not too hard, I hope. So let's do our Unitarian Universalist affirmation. If anybody wants to help me, you are most welcome. And then we're going to go back, and we have some cards of care that we're going to be working on, and we're going to be talking more about love with our children and youth, mostly children today, it looks like. So here we go. Ready? We are Unitarian Universalists, a people of open minds, loving hearts, and helping hands. All right. And I'm going to gather my things and my device that helps my body, which I love, to move with less pain. And I will see you all in a little while. Thank you for listening. Thank you. And I love you all. All right, let's head on back. Anybody who's coming to play, let's go play.
I'm just gonna add a little thing of my own. I'm sorry, that's, my mom, I was blessed to have a mother that taught me to love myself when I was young, and that you can't really love anybody else if you don't love yourself first. And that was a huge and valuable lesson. Thanks, Mom. Generosity is one of the spiritual values we recognize as central to our personal and institutional well-being. You are now invited to participate in the blessing of giving as the ushers come to accept the gifts of the congregation. And those of you at home, the chat box, I believe, is where you can find a way to donate online. Now we'll hear the offertory from Barbara.
This is the first of 3 romances that Clara Schumann wrote, dedicated to her husband. So she was the concert pianist primarily, and he was the composer, but she also composed, and she really loved to compose. And I think she had like 8 children, I think. So the composition was hard for her to like make the time for, but anyway, it's a beautiful piece, and you can hear the love. She really loved her husband, and you can hear the way the hands kind of cross over each other and complete each other's thoughts.
I think the last time I stood here and looked out at this room, there were 2 people sitting here. Well, we've come through a lot in the last couple of years, haven't we? And what a privilege it is to be here in person again. And to hear such lovely music. And Pierre, thank you so much for leading us in our songs when we're a little on the shaky side. So it begins just after Christmas, the marketing of love. You know, the heart-shaped candy boxes and all the cards and the flowers and everything else. Everything in red and white, and the implications that if you don't have someone who loves you in that very special Valentine-y way, there might be something wrong with you. Or at least you might be missing out. Well, those of us who have been around for a while, 83 years in my case, we've learned that love isn't all this clear-cut. This love business is mighty complicated. It's terribly messy. It's complicated, and sometimes you wonder if it's worth it, but then it can also be simply splendid. It's lots of things, and I'm not going to attempt to go into anything that's very far afield. I can only tell you a few of my own experiences, with some quotes and thoughts from others tucked in. Those of you who know me probably think that a love of music would be high on my list, and you would be right. But even in the realm of music, there are complications. As a youngster, I didn't want to practice. I did what I learned would satisfy my teacher at the next lesson, and not much more. I wasn't a good reader, so I had to work hard at learning and memorizing pieces, and this required quite a lot of effort. Eventually, though, I began to kind of absorb some of the music I was learning, or it began to kind of wrap itself around me in a way that I just really didn't understand, but I found that it became a part of me, and I couldn't get it out of my head. This relationship with music, this love of music, remains, of course, and as I become less active in producing music myself, I increasingly value the music of others. And I'm so grateful for the technology which brings the music of the world right to wherever I live. And as you know, I do a lot of moving around. For many of us, I suspect there is a great love of nature. Perhaps your love is specific to birds, or to horses, or to the coastal redwoods, or some other specific species. When I came to California, having lived for over 40 years of my life in the Northeast, I didn't know any of these things, and I felt lost. Many times I was indeed lost, having always known the ocean to be east of me and the open land to be west, and it was profoundly confusing. Back east, I had known the names of the weeds, the hills, the hemlocks, the white pines, but not here. I needed to know the names of the mountains, of the birds, of the wildflowers, and it was a process. And I asked people to help me, and I received a lot of help. Now, I've learned enough so that my love and respect for my natural surroundings in this part of the world is held in a relationship. You know, about 10 days ago, there was snow on Cuyamaca, and the brilliant yellow oxalis is now blooming in the San Diego River Valley. And at the end of March, March 21st to be precise, the hooded orioles will return to Mary and Paul's palm trees, as they do every year. Here in California, the love of nature can be beautiful, but also mighty messy, frightening too. The more than abundant rain that we had last month and for a couple weeks before that even, the saturated coastal cliffs dropping precipitously onto the beaches, the mudslides, the uprooted trees and the flooded out roads, the Santa Ana winds, the fire season. To live in this part of the earth, to love our surroundings, we have to find the way to balance that destructive power with the utterly amazing beauty. Those who inhabited these lands prior to our European ancestors, they knew how to live with respect for both the beauty and the destructiveness of this natural world. If I say I love nature, I must walk the path of balance with it. And then there is the terribly complicated, awfully messy, unbelievably beautiful love we humans are sometimes privileged to share with one another. The poet Rainer Maria Rilke says, "Close your eyes, fall in love, stay there." It sounds so simple. It has been nearly 9 years now since my husband John died of cancer. I fought like crazy to change the outcome, but it was finally clear to both of us. We were able to talk about the fact that he was dying. My job was to carry out his wishes, to be sure he was able to die where and with those he chose to be around him. He asked me to promise him that I would be all right. I couldn't answer that right away. But finally I said, yes, eventually I will be all right. At that time, I had no idea what kind of self-love would be required for me to learn how to be all right. To be alone, but not lonely. Sure, I had lots of support from my friends and family, but when it came right down to the nitty-gritty, I had to love myself enough to get out of bed when I didn't feel like ever getting up again. I had to love myself enough to sign up for a Rhodes Scholar trip to New Zealand, a very faraway place that John had wanted to visit, but now I needed to do it and carry his spirit with me. And even in the quotidian activities of preparing a meal for myself, I needed to love myself enough to think of the presentation, maybe even take a photo of my plate. Because for me, this is part of being all right. And as I see it, this is a continuance of love, an honoring of the love John and I shared. Of course, there's still sadness because he's no longer here, and I would so like it to be otherwise. But there is also gratitude. I am immensely grateful for the 32 years John and I shared. And even though that gratitude sometimes makes my eyes water, it is kind of like exercise. You have to work at it, but it's really important. A couple of weeks ago, I went to see a recently released film, A Man Called Otto, starring Tom Hanks. Some of you have seen it. The trailers looked to me like a feel-good movie, something to cheer me up on yet another rainy Sunday afternoon. Well, it was lots more. There is some endearing comedy in A Man Called Otto. But unexpectedly, it had me and several others who were making their way from the theater wiping tears. It is a beautiful, loving story about a grumpy old man who has lots of really good reasons to be grumpy and really doesn't want to keep on dealing with life. And then along comes a new neighbor with her chaotic family, her persistently friendly attitude, and we're engaged in a story of community love. And oh, there is a persistently affectionate stray cat, too. It is an inspiring story, a love story, complicated, messy, and yet wonderful. There are times when the complicated and messy aspects of love seem to win out. Love becomes something unromantic, tough, determined, devoted, and in spite of. And we may find ourselves caring for a beloved partner, doing what once might have seemed impossible, and fiercely holding to a love in a terribly challenging form. When John and I knew that his cancer was terminal, he told me he wanted to return from Maine to California to be with his elder sister, a gifted retired nurse. So with the help of our adult son, we made the arrangements to shift our hospice care from Brunswick, Maine to Temecula, California. At that point, John could no longer walk or even stand, and our journey across the country was epic, requiring the help of many and the strong kindness of many strangers. When we finally arrived, we realized, sadly, that his sister Anne, with whom John had helped several of their elders through the dying process, could only put her stethoscope around her shoulders and no longer remembered how to carry out her nursing skills, even with her beloved brother. It didn't take long for me to completely fall apart. Our then 31-year-old son lovingly gathered me and suggested that we needed to hire full-time help. Hospice recommended a live-in nurse with the skills that we needed. I was resistant to this at first, trying to be that strong, heroic partner who could do it all right to the very end. But hiring full-time nursing help turned out to be an act of love for John, for me, for the rest of the family. And I shall forever be grateful to our son, Will, who, while grieving the imminent loss of his father, had the wisdom and the compassion to urge me to make this decision. Oh, there are so many ways of love. From the joy of discovery, the commitment of lifelong partnership, all the way to death, to the seemingly superficial loving kindness from or toward a complete stranger, a momentary gesture that just might be the high point of someone's day. The afternoon that I went all the way to Oceanside to see A Man Called Otto, it was pouring buckets when the movie was done. I headed first for the restroom, and as I finished drying my hands and putting on my bright yellow rain jacket, I pulled out my coaster schedule. A woman who was standing nearby saw what I was doing and asked how far I was traveling. I told her I lived in Encinitas. "So do we," she said. "My husband and I drove up here with another friend, and we're about to drive back home. Would you like to have a ride?" Well, as my daughters will tell you, I'm fiercely determined to use public transportation. But looking at the conditions, even as well prepared as I thought I was, this was an offer I really wanted to accept. Indeed, these folks had a sturdy four-seater truck We exchanged names, and I learned they live within walking distance of me. Her brother-in-law is my granddaughter's high school welding teacher. I suppose accepting a ride from someone you meet in a public restroom sounds a bit risky. Well, as a matter of fact, that thought did cross my mind. But gut feelings came into play, and it was, as we'd say in Maine, a wicked smat decision. Well, the ride home on a rainy afternoon certainly doesn't constitute a love relationship, but it might be a metaphor for trusting. For me, that stormy afternoon, I made some new friends and arrived home nearly dry and grinning with gratitude. So I ask, is there any kind of love that isn't risky, that doesn't involve trust, that doesn't open us to vulnerability? Probably some pretty hard work and even grief. We can protect ourselves from these risks by turning down the possibilities, but that is where we hope we've lived long enough and deeply enough to make good choices. May we go forward with the courage to know that life is far richer when love is present. And may we approach the possibilities and challenges of love with open minds, loving hearts. You finish it. Welcoming hands. Our closing song is one I'm going to ask Barbara to play all the way through again. It's in the Gray hymnal. And I had to laugh when I first found this because living through January and all that rain, the title of this hymn is Make Channels for the Streams of Love.
Make channels for the streams of love where they may broadly run, and love has overflowing streams within them everyone. But if at any time we see such channels to provide, the very founts of love for us will soon be parched and dried. For we must share if we would keep this gift all else above. We cease to give, we cease to have, such is the law of love.
You may be seated. My closing words are from Saint Mary Oliver. To live in this world, you must be able to do three things: to love what is mortal, to hold it against your bones, knowing your own life depends upon it, and when the time comes to let it go, to let it go. Blessed be.
Now a closing circle song. Or do you want to stand up and take hands in a big circle? Actually, quite a few more people. Sorry, I'm not at the mic, but you can hear me. I'm